In every fight, there's always a loser and a winner. But the question is, how did the loser lose? A thrilling knockout or submission? A roaring comeback? Or worst of all, an embarrassing injury? You don't have to lose to have an embarrassing moment in sports. From boneheaded blunders, to untimely bodily functions, wardrobe malfunctions, to showboating fails on the sport's biggest stage. It's been 25 years since the UFC became a sport, and over the years, it's seen its fair share of embarrassing moments among the fighters. Today, we're going to show you the most embarrassing UFC moments for fighters ever. But before we begin, do well to like this video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications for this channel. First on our list, no one would have ever topped Justin Josh's match with Felice Herrig at UFC Fight Night 112. On the 25th of June 2017, strawweight standouts Felice Herrig and Justine Kish went head-to-head in Oklahoma City. Herrig versus Kish turned out to be an exciting battle and featured some solid grappling. As the fight went on, Herrig secured what was known as a body triangle. For those unfamiliar, a body triangle is a move that involves squeezing an opponent's stomach or torso with one's legs in a figure 4 position. The body triangle is a fairly standard grappling maneuver in the UFC. However, this time around, it produced a very unique result. After the movement was applied and the two other women rolled over, several large brown spots were visible on the mat. Disaster struck for Justine Kish as she defecated, leaving easily visible brown stains on the octagon mat. Believe it or not, neither fighter seemed to notice at the time, and the fight continued on to a decision, at which point Kish looked down in horror at the mat. "I knew it wasn't Felice," Kish told iHeartRadio of her ordeal that night. "I see myself and I'm like, oh no, oh my god, that's me." And then I'm thinking, do I clean it up? What do I do? I look at my corner, I'm pointing, and I'm like, that's my on the floor. Well, she wanted to flee to the nearest exit. Out of sportsmanship, Kish stayed on until after the decision was announced, which after she felt like an eternity for her predicament, before finally leaving the octagon. However, despite her nightmare situation, Kish showed a sense of humor afterwards on social media. "I am a warrior, and I will never quit soon. Ha ha ha. Be back soon." Some fighters may threaten to beat the crap out of other opponents, but Felice Herrig remains one of the few who actually did. Up next is Rosemar Pilares. Mid-fight victory celebration. One of the most embarrassing things a man can do in their everyday life is to celebrate when the results aren't even in. Back in 2011, Dan Miller took on a hard-hitting Brazilian submission specialist, Rosemar Pilares, at UFC 134. Early in the first round, Pilares managed to get his opponent to the mat and unleash some vicious ground and pound. He then went on to celebrate by jumping on the cage and raised his arms in victory. At this point, one might reasonably ask, what's so embarrassing about that? You see, the problem was the referee, Herb Dean, never actually stopped the fight. The contest was still technically going on during the celebration. After an awkward exchange between the referee and the overzealous fighter, the match continued. Miller did land a blow that sent the Brazilian to the mat following the incident. However, Pilares was able to win the fight. Next up, when Dennis Hallman stepped into the octagon at UFC 133 wearing a disturbingly small pair of blue Speedos. It wasn't the result of a fashion choice on the UFC fighter's behalf. I won't say what the bet was about, but I lost a bet to those guys, and losing the bet meant that I got to wear some Speedos. Hallman told Ariel Helwani afterwards. As embarrassing as this was for Hallman, it also left him able to only fit 2 sponsors on the small amount of fabric on the Speedos, costing him a lot of money. However, it got even worse for Hallman when during the fight, he suffered a wardrobe malfunction in the midst of a grappling exchange that led to his testicles being exposed on live TV. To add to his woes, Dana White was fuming about Hallman's attire, stating afterwards that he was horrified and disgusted by the sight of Speedos and banned anyone from following suit in the future. He also revealed that he had given Brad Ebersol a $70,000 "thanks for getting that off television as fast as possible" bonus after he completed Hallman's humiliation by KOing him later in the first round. Up next, in what was clearly the most embarrassing showing by any fighter in the UFC octagon, James Toney showed just how desperate some former stars are for some attention and money. After running his mouth on the sport of mixed martial arts and the UFC Hall of former Randy Couture for months, it was finally time for James Toney to put up or shut up at UFC 118, and oh, what a glorious failure it was. Within 15 seconds, Toney found himself on the floor and shortly thereafter found found himself mounted by Couture. The Natural pounded on Tony's head until he was bored and decided to end it with an arm triangle to put the boxer out of his misery. Next up, we have Gary Maynard. One of the most bizarre finishes in UFC history took place in 2007 at the Ultimate Fighter 5 finale. The last thing you want to do is make a fool of yourself and knock yourself out, but Gray Maynard didn't seem to see it as that. In a preliminary bout, former NCAA Division I wrestler and future UFC title challenger Gray Maynard took on a karate specialist Rob Emerson in their respective UFC debuts. After stunning Rob Emerson with a series of punches to their fight in the 2UF5 finale, Maynard picked up Emerson for a double leg takedown, slammed him near through the mat, and forced a tap out due to injured ribs. Apparently, he slammed a little too hard because Maynard's head hit the canvas and the blow knocked himself out as the opponent tapped. Pretty embarrassing for an accomplished wrestler like Gray Maynard, just saying. With both men unable to continue, the bout was ruled as a no contest. Next up, Kevin Randleman gives himself a TKO backstage at UFC 24. While warming up backstage for his UFC Heavyweight Championship fight with Pedro Rizzo at UFC 24, Kevin Randleman slipped and suffered a concussion. The injury forced the main event to be cancelled. The two fighters met later at UFC 26. Up next, we have Chuck Liddell interview on the Good Morning Texas show. In his UFC heyday, Chuck Liddell took full advantage of being one of the sport's biggest stars and was known to party like a rock star. However, that appeared to catch up with him during an infamously cringeworthy interview on Good Morning Texas show back in 2007, in which Liddell was so incoherent that people immediately began to suspect he must be either drunk or on drugs. The show's host soon began to show concern for how Liddell was acting, asking him if he was okay at one stage as he repeatedly mumbled and slurred his words, and even appeared to momentarily fall asleep at one point. The appearance was hugely embarrassing for both Liddell, who claimed later he'd overtaken sleep medication, and the UFC, who pulled him from all other scheduled promotional interviews to avoid any more PR disasters. Up next is Max Holloway. UFC featherweight champion Max Holloway had a challenging weight cut prior to UFC 218 last year that left him having to strip down to his birthday suit in order to make the featherweight limit. Standing in front of the assembled media, towels were brought out to protect Blessed's modesty, so he looked onto the scale, but things didn't quite go according to plan. Unfortunately for Holloway, one of the two men holding the towel for him, fellow fighter Justin Gaethje, decided to flip the towel as he stood there, which mistakenly resulted in his man parts being left exposed for the waiting cameras. Holloway quickly covered up and Gaethje laughed off this blunder, but later Blessed accidentally also exposed his bare butt again as he tried to put his shorts back on. Next up is Seth Petrozelli beats Kimbo Slice. Many hardcore fans rejoiced when Seth Petrozelli dethroned internet sensation Kimbo Slice on national television. The reason why it was a bad moment was the nearly single-handedly brought down the elite XC organization who was using Slice as their figurehead, and it was shamefully melodramatic when announcer Gus Johnson exclaimed it to be the biggest upset in the history of MMA. Plus, those strikes to the back of the head were totally illegal. That's a wrap for today's video. Thanks for watching, guys.